This episode of the Mega Meeple is brought to you by our supporters over at Pod Pledge. Welcome back to the Mega Meeple, the show all about gamers and the games that bring them together. This is episode 45, and just a reminder that we are 5 episodes away from our 50th episode, which is also the same weekend as our 1-year anniversary, which also happens on the weekend of International Tabletop Day. So we're going to be partying up and gaming all weekend long. Now, if you would like to be a part of our 50th episode 1-year anniversary celebration, all you gotta do is record an audio clip of you saying, hey, this is, state your name. And if you have a game or a podcast or a YouTube channel you want to plug, you could do that as well. And then you say, happy 50th episode or happy 1-year anniversary to the Mega Meeple. And send that audio clip in either an MP3 or a WAV file to megameeple@outlook.com. And we will play your audio clip at the beginning of our 50th episode. We've already gotten so many audio clips in, but we're always accepting more. Well, this is the season of Kickstarters, particularly all the Kickstarters that you may have backed last year is now starting to get delivered to its backers. And this past week, I received my Glyph Collector's Edition of Kickstarter by Kazudu Games. And actually, we had Justin Potter, who's designed the game, interview back in episode 14. If you want to go and listen to that, that is on their archives on our website, or you go to iTunes and just bring up episode 14, and we have an interview with Justin that we did back when the Kickstarter was going. And it's basically a player versus player or team versus team dice combat game. And so I'm getting ready to learn how to play that. And actually, I'm going to be talking about learning and teaching board games. That's the topic for this episode. Before we get to our special guest this episode, actually our guest interview this week is Frank West. This was recorded back, actually the same day I received City of Kings is the day that we recorded this interview with Frank. So it was a good thing, to finally get him on the show as we interviewed him as the Kickstarters were starting to get shipped out to its backers. So stay tuned for that later in the episode. Now, I mentioned getting these Kickstarters being delivered now from the games that I backed last year. For example, I got the Rising Sun, I got the Zombicide Green Horde, got City of Kings, got Blue Shift, and just recently, like the past day or two, I received Glyph. So usually when I get a new game, that's when I usually go on BGG and see what kind of files have been uploaded. Usually there's like a FAQ or a sort of like a synopsis of the rules as a one sheet, or I will go straight to Rodney's videos, Watch It Played, and hopefully he's gotten like a video up, or planning to at least, because I'm very visual, so I like to actually see something done first, and that's how I'm able to really, internalize it and learn it and make it stick. But sometimes we don't have the luxury of having, especially for brand new games, unless the company has come out with a how to play or tutorial video of the game themselves. We're really reliant on third-party YouTube content creators to be able to do that. And you could watch like previews, but usually with stuff like that, they're using prototypes or a WIP rule book, which is not the final version, and they're not really as Kickstarters and games develop and change. You can't really rely on those previews too much. So you're really having to rely on how well the rule book is done, and that we're going to be talking about that in another episode. That's a topic for another episode where we talk about rule books, good rule books, crappy rule books, and just our 2 cents worth of what designers and publishers and people who are the powers to be that write those rule books can really take to heart and help us out by making a really good rule book. But we'll talk about that on another episode. I was at a gaming event, and somebody had brought 7 Wonders. And I remember trying to learn 7 Wonders, and it really, I mean, thinking back, it really goes back to the person teaching the game. I'm going to talk about, I'm going to do both sides of the coin. I'm going to talk about some do's and don'ts on teaching a game, and also some do's and don'ts on when you're learning a game. But I remember the first time I played 7 Wonders, it really wasn't taught to me in a cohesive way. A lot of information was withheld. A lot of information was, I guess I was like assumed to know it already. I don't know how that was a thing. But it got to the point where, and I wasn't the only one, that there was one other person there that was basically having the same trouble with it. But I think his main problem was his eyesight was pretty crappy and wasn't able to read or see a lot of the icons on the cards. But me, I was like, there's so much stuff that wasn't explained that I just got to the point where I just tuned out. And I didn't even pay attention to what I was doing. I mean, halfway through the game, it was like, you know what? Evidently, these things are not going to be taught. My questions are not going to get answered. So usually when they did the card drafting part, I didn't even bother looking at the cards. I just took the first card on top of the pile, plopped it in front of me, and passed the cards over to the next person in the card drafting. I didn't even bother looking at the cards. So I was like, yeah, okay. So when it was time to score, I was like, yeah, okay, here, that's what I have. Nothing was, the synergy wasn't there because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Now, mind you, the person who was teaching the game, I never met that person. I didn't know that person. And actually, thinking back, I don't think I've ever seen that person ever since. So I pretty much gave up on, 7 Wonders. Okay, that game, the first experience was a bad one. I didn't care about the game, no matter how great people said it was. I was not interested in it because of that initial bad taste in my mouth from that experience. Well, later on, a friend of mine who did know preferences on learning a game, he said, well, you want to try it a second time? So he sat me and a few other people down, and he taught the game, and he taught it well. He answered all the questions. He didn't just, if I asked a question, he didn't just, toss the rule book at me and the player there. And that's another thing. I don't know if there's player aids for 7 Wonders, but if there are, I don't remember ever getting one that first time I played when we were trying to learn it. But anyway, the second time I played it, the person who taught me knew my personality. We were good friends, and he taught it in a way that I was able to understand it. And it was only then that I realized and understood what all the icons on the cards were, what they all meant, how they played, the mechanics and dynamics of how the symbols played together, what the end result was, what the victory conditions were. I didn't get any of that the first time that I sat down and played it and learned it from the person who evidently didn't know what the hell they were doing, or they just assumed that everybody knew how to play the game. So I say that to lead into my rant for this episode, and it's basically the do's and don'ts of not only teaching the game, but also learning the game. And from my experience from Seven Wonders, one thing I tell you of a person from the perspective of learning a game is if your first experience with a game is a bad one, for one reason or another, at least give the game at least a second chance. Because sometimes, maybe it was, in my case, with Seven Wonders, the way the person was teaching the game. Get someone else to teach you the game, or play with a different group of people, and you just might find out that that game was not as crappy as you initially thought. Another thing is ask questions. But I'm gonna modify that suggestion a little bit, is when I talk about things to do when you're teaching the game. But ask questions. If the teacher is telling you something you don't understand, speak up. Let them know. Okay, I don't understand what you're saying there. What does that mean to do this? And if you're like me, very visual, I like to see an example of a particular rule being played out. So I may ask, okay, can you show me an example either in the rule book, or can you place the cards or the minis in such a way on the board that you could visually or physically demonstrate that particular rule being played out, or that particular mechanic being played. And hopefully if the person teaching it stops every once in a while and allows for questions, make sure you ask your questions. Whatever was just finished being explained to you, if you don't understand that particular mechanic, ask for a clarification, or ask if they could explain it to you a different way, or actually physically demonstrate on the board that particular mechanic or rule being played out. So you could actually not only hear the rules by someone telling you, but you actually see the rules being played out and how that will look like in the gameplay. Now, another thing that would be helpful with learning the game is, and this may be just contradictory to what I just said, but I think you'll understand what I'm saying when I describe it, is you're learning a game, it's a brand new one, you've never seen it before. The person has everything laid out. Before the teacher or whoever it is teaching or demonstrating the game even starts, before one syllable exits their mouth, do not start asking questions. What does this mean? Oh, you point to an icon. What do these mean? Okay, what does that do? Chances are there's a whole crap load of rules you need to know beforehand before you even get to the part where that particular icon or that particular mini or that particular card even comes into play. So if you start asking questions about what does this icon mean, or what does this card do, what does this mini do, stop and listen to the person demoing the game or teaching the game. And I think you'll find that sooner or later he's going to get to that part where he describes what that icon means, or what that card means, or what anything of those things that you mean. So don't just regurgitate a whole crap load of questions as soon as you sit down, because there's going to be a flow, or there's going to be a reason why certain things need to be taught or demoed before other things. And if you're infatuated or concerned or overwhelmed about all these icons or all these cards or all these minis or whatever it is that you're questioning right off, right from the very beginning, right out of the gate, then you're not focusing on the rules that you need to know in order to understand what those things do or what those things mean when the demo person gets to those things as part of the demo. So you need to focus, pay attention to what the demo person or the game teacher is telling you right then and there. And I promise you, sure enough, when they get to the part where they explain what this icon or what this card does, chances are your questions about those things would already have been answered. So it's really important to not only ask questions when the time allows for it, don't regurgitate a whole crapload of questions right out of the gate before the demo even begins. Basically, to put it bluntly, shut up, pay attention, focus on what the person teaching you the game is saying, and I promise they'll get to your questions sooner or later. Don't worry. Just concentrate on what's being told and taught to you right then and there. Another thing is, if you already know how to play the game, unless you are asked or invited or requested to teach the game, don't interject. Now, some people may disagree with that, but hey, you could talk about that on your podcast. This is the Mega Meeple podcast, and this is what I think. When you got 2 or 3 people teaching the same game, that's a real good way to information overload, or confuse the person learning the game, because it's just too much information being shot at them all at the same time. Now, if the person demoing the game does a crappy job, make suggestions. Hey, you may want to teach this part before you get to that. Or did you tell them about, as the person teaching the game, did you tell the new person about this? Whoever it is demoing or teaching the game should be the only one really talking. And then the last thing I'll talk about is just a pretty obvious thing, and it goes back to just focusing and paying attention, is put your damn phone away. Don't be playing another game or something when, especially now, if you already know how to play the game, yeah, sure, have your phone out, to be, replying to emails, or, maybe put something up on Facebook or Instagram, or take a photo of the game and put it up on Instagram, say, hey, we're playing this game. That's what I do. That's all fine and good if you already know how to play the game. Now, if there's somebody at that table that doesn't know how to play that game, or this is the first time that they've even seen the game, you need to put your phone away or whatever, and pay attention and focus on what's being taught to you or demoed to you at that time. Now, as far as teaching the game, one of the first things that I do when I get, like I said, I just talked about all these new Kickstarter games coming to me, being delivered, of games that I backed last year. Before I start teaching or even thinking about teaching a game, and this is even if there are videos on YouTube demonstrating the game, or have a tutorial of the game, even with those there, because a lot of people, when they learn a game, they don't want to watch a video. Hear face to face, personal, of people, somebody teaching them the game. So when I get a new game, I just play it myself. I don't care whether it's a solo variant at all. It could be a 3 or 4 player game. Then I will set up the game with 3 or 4 players, or if it's a player versus player, I'll set up the game as it would be, 1 versus 1, or 1 versus many. And I will actually go from chair to chair around the table, playing all the different parts. And make sure that when you're playing the game as all the different players by yourself, that's the way you could. That's the time you can start fleshing out the rules, because chances you're going to get the rules wrong, or you're going to miss something, or there's going to be one little sentence in the rule book that you're going to forget about or overlook that's going to affect the game. I mean, hell, I've played some games 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7 different times, and then found out, oh crap, we've been playing that wrong all this time. So I was like, okay, well, good to know. We're learning experience. We'll know better next time. Regardless of whether it's a solo variant applied to the game or not, take the rule of all the players, and if it's a 4-player game, set up the game for 4 players and just go from chair to chair around the table and play all those different characters. Now, the first thing with teaching or demoing the game, the very first thing that you should tell everybody is how to win. What is the winning victory conditions? I mean, that's why when we have all these guests on the show, that's one of the de facto questions that I ask them. Tell me about the game and tell me how the mechanics work and what the victory conditions are. And that's a standard question I ask all of our guests when they come on and talk about any games, because they could talk about how great their game is until the cows come home. But if people don't know how to win the frickin' thing, then why should I be interested in their game? Why should I put the time and effort to play the game or even learn the game if I don't know how to win it? Now understand, your only goal should not be to win the game. When I sit down and play a game, my goal is to have fun. There's plenty of games where I haven't won a game since I've had it or since I've played. I've had fun playing it, but still, in order to understand all the different mechanics and how the game plays, we got to know how to win the game first. And keep coming back to that victory condition. As you're talking about different mechanics of the game, explain how that particular mechanic will benefit you in reaching that victory condition. So that brings us to when you're explaining the mechanics of the game, focus on the concept of the game, the mechanics first. There may be things in the game that are specific scenarios or very specific situational things that may or may not happen in the game. You could leave those things out. Because again, if you just keep dumping a whole crap ton of rules on the person to learn the game, it's going to be too much. And sooner or later, they're going to tune you out. And then they're going to lose interest. But when you're explaining the mechanics of the game, keep it generalized with the concept of the mechanics, and if those specific situational rules come up during play, then you could stop and say, okay, well, this is a unique situation, doesn't happen all the time, but in this situation, this is what would happen, or this is what you can do, or these are the options that are available to you in this specific situation. So keep your explanation of the mechanics general, and explain the details and the situational rules when that situation actually occurs. Because you could play, a half a dozen games, and that particular scenario may never come up. And actually, I should point out, before you even, this should be coming before explaining the victory conditions or how to win the game. But when you have people come to the table or sit down at the table, or if you're in an event situation and you're getting ready to play the game, or you're getting ready to demo a game, and somebody else comes up, let them sit down. If they're interested in learning the game, involve them, include them. And sometimes if I'm demoing a game, if there's enough people interested, I will just stand up and let one of the new people take my spot in the game. I'm not always actually playing the game with the person as I'm teaching them. I mean, I remember at Mesa last year, I demoed or GM'd both Scythe and Terraforming Mars, and we had both of those games. The table was full. Every player there had never played those games before. So basically what I did is, as I'm demoing or explaining the game, I'm not actually playing the game with them. I'm sort of just kind of hovering around the table over their shoulders, saying, okay, this is how this works. You could do this. These options are available to you. This is how this works. And I let everybody actually play the game and learn it as they're playing. Now, at times when I am playing the game with a person, I don't always try to win by playing those games. Now, I know people, when they teach the games, especially card games, they will do their best to win the game, and a new person would lose. Well, when I all those months a while back when I was doing demos for Ashes, Rise of the Phoenixborn, I'd be teaching a person how to play the game, and I would on purpose not do certain things, or I on purpose would do certain things to create a certain situation that will allow me to teach some strategy or something else or some option that's available to them as far as the strategy goes. When I'm teaching someone new, I'm not out to beat them and win the game and take that as like an easy win. Oh, I just won that game because I was just teaching the person, but I wasn't teaching everything I knew. You know, to me, that's a pretty cheap win. You know, if the only way you could get a win on a game is by teaching or by playing someone who doesn't know how to play, and you're being very selective or reticent on, you're only teaching them certain things, but you're not teaching them all the things that they need to know to play or win the game. You're just telling them enough to play the game, but for you to win. When I'm teaching someone a new game, I'm not interested in winning. I'm interested in having them learn the game, and if they need help or want help as far as strategies, then I'll help them with that. But a lot of people want to find out those strategies on their own. They just want to know the core rules, basic fundamentals of how to win, what to do, and what options are available to them to win that game. And they want to figure out the strategies of winning on their own. Another thing is, as people are coming up and sitting down at the table to learn the game, a good thing of before you even begin is just ask them, okay, have you played this game before? If they say no, great. And then what I like to do is ask them, how do you prefer to learn the game? Do you like to watch videos? Do you like to read rule books? Or do you like to learn by actually playing the game? And whatever their style or personality is as far as how they learn things, I will tailor the demo to them as far as, you know, okay, if they like to know about all the rules beforehand, then I know it's like, okay, I can sit them down and verbally explain to them how to play the game. Or if they're the type of person like me who like to learn by actually doing, then before I even start telling them how to play the game, I'll explain to them the victory condition, and then I'll say, okay, let's just go through like a practice round. Let's go through a practice round to, you know, just get their feet wet on how to play the game and how a player turn is and how a round goes, and basically teach them along the way as they're actually playing. But I always ask them, how do they like learning things? Do they like learning by reading, by seeing, or actually doing it? And then I'll tailor my demo to suit whatever style of learning that they prefer. Another thing that you need to do when you're teaching a game is, after you explain a particular aspect of the game, be it a player's turn or a round or anything like that, pick times during your demo to stop at a good stopping point and say, okay, are there any questions? And then have people ask you questions about whatever it was that you just finished explaining. So, okay, I'm explaining how the dice work of a game. After I go through all the things about how the dice work and what the different sides of the dice mean, I'll stop and I say, okay, do you have any questions about that? And if they ask, well, what does this icon mean? Or what does that mini do? I said, no, we're only focusing on the dice right now. I'm explaining what the different sides of the dice mean. Do you have any questions about that? I'll explain what the icons mean later. I'll explain what this card does later, but if I just got done explaining the dice, take questions about the dice. And then if nobody has any questions about what you just finished teaching them or demoing, then okay, good. we're all on the same page, you move on to the next aspect of the game. I mean, to me, it's akin to learning music. I'm a bass player. I'm currently learning how to play guitar. And there are things that my teacher tells me is like, okay, we're learning a riff. Break the riff down into 2 sections. So I'll learn like 2 measures of a riff, and I'll just keep practicing those 2 measures until I got it down and I got it memorized and I got muscle memory going, and I don't even have to look at the music to play it. It's like, okay, I got that down, so then I'll learn the next 2 measures. And I'll just keep practicing those 2 measures until I got that down. And then I'll go back and I'll practice the 4 measure, the 2 measures I just learned and the 2 measures prior. And I'll put those 2 sections together and I'll practice all 4 of those measures. So that's how you could take a game, divide it up into certain sections, explain that section, invite people to ask questions about that particular section you just demoed, answer those questions, and if there's no questions, move on to the next part. And just build upon those things as individual sections of the game. Okay, so those are just my little tidbits of advice as far as learning a game and also teaching a game. So what do you guys think? When you learn a brand new game, what approach do you like? How do you learn a game? If you're somebody who teaches games or demos games at your local family game store, what approach and techniques have you found helpful in teaching games to new people? Feel free to reach out to us to any of our social media outlets and tell us what your take is on this. All those links can be found on the social media page on our website. It's www.themegameeple.com. All right, welcome back to the Mega Meeple, and as timing would have it, the guest for this episode, I actually received his game Kickstarter about 2 hours before we started recording. So, but I'm really excited to dig into it. But we have Frank West, and of a successful Kickstarter from last year called City of Kings. How you doing, Frank?
I'm really well. How are you doing?
Doing good. Great. Thank you. So, yeah, just first impression of the game as it. I mean, UPS guy left a little care package for me about 2 hours ago, and just initial impressions. Like, I mean, the quality of the stuff is fantastic, and you just really packed a whole bunch of stuff into that box. And
that's really good to hear. It's kind of it's strange because obviously the game's just started shipping this last week, and I guess you're probably the first person I've actually spoken to verbally who's received the game, who obviously I haven't really spoken to before. So it's really good that your initial thoughts are good on the game and that you're happy with what we've managed to get in there.
Oh yes, very much. It's a pretty hefty box. I was thinking because pictures could only tell you so much unless you have like a ruler or something next to it to get a scale reference. But yeah, I was blown away just by the size and thickness of the box, and then just all the stuff that was in there, and then just the quality of the cards. Now I think I got the deluxe version, I think. So I got like the little plastic overlays that we could put over the player boards.
Yep, the anti-knock sheets and the kind of wooden tokens and the plastic setup trays.
Yep. So yeah, those setup trays, I right off the bat I could see how useful those puppies are going to be as far as just containing everything in the box. But Yeah, but I mean, first of all, congratulations on a successful Kickstarter and getting your game out there. And the Kickstarter was last year, what, March and April of
Yeah, I
2017.
think we launched on March 27th. So we're kind of about, nearly 12 months since we launched now, which is, I mean, it's crazy how quickly it's gone, but also how much has happened in that time.
Yeah, a lot could happen in a year. So, but you have a company called City of Games, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. Oh, tell us about that and how City of Games was created.
So, I mean, I guess the City of Games kind of comes from two sides of things. I mean, one side of it is obviously the publishing and this desire to design games and that needing to be under an umbrella of some sort. But equally, I've always liked the idea of just bringing people together and playing games. I spend a lot of time kind of going to different gaming groups, and I've organized countless groups over the years. And I always kind of like this idea of one day organizing bigger conventions and events where effectively, we turn like a city into this gaming city for the weekend and just kind of get all the different entertainments in the city to kind of come together and to organize it. So when I was picking out the publishing name and stuff, I was like, I'm just going to try and tie this all together, and hopefully as the kind of years go on and we design more games, we're going to be able to create kind of conventions and these events to kind of go alongside.
That's pretty cool. So now you had the convention, I guess about a month or so ago at the time we recorded this. So how did it go?
Yeah, it was really good. It was one of the strangest things because when you organize a convention, you're always unsure how many people you're going to get, and you always have to kind of make the decision about venue size. And
Right.
we made a decision to go to what we thought was a reasonably large size for our first event, and we kind of launched the tickets, and we did a Kickstarter for the ticket sales, and we sold out of tickets in just under 4 days, and it kind of just blew us away because it was incredible because it meant everything was going to happen, but there was just so much more demand. And I mean, the event this year was amazing because we had so many people and everything was perfect. And knowing in advance that we were just totally sold out allowed us to focus on making the event better rather than trying to sell more tickets. And it just kind of gives me hope that next year, we can try and double the number of people or triple the number of people and just kind of keep growing on what we did.
That's cool. Now, for our listening audience, just so you know, this convention is in Bristol, UK, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, right in the center of the
So,
city.
so all of our listeners over in the UK, if you don't know about it, now, is this convention going to be like an annual thing now?
Yeah, so we haven't 100% confirmed it yet because we now need to make a decision. One of the problems with Bristol and the advantages of Bristol is that venues either go from the kind of 100 to 400 range or kind of 1,000, 1,500 people upwards. There's nothing kind of in between
Oh,
that
okay.
400 and 1,000 people mark.
There's
So
no
we're
middle
trying to
ground.
make a decision about whether we want to just keep in that kind of 400 zone or whether we really want to kind of grow it up into the thousands. And we're kind of deciding that over March, and then we'll make the announcements about what we're going to be doing probably in April.
Okay, great. So, all of our listeners over in England and the UK, keep an eye out for that. For all our friends here in America or elsewhere, hey, start saving up your airline tickets. Hey, so there you
It's
go.
going to be one of the conventions on the map in a few years, I'm sure.
No doubt. I mean, if now City of Kings is your first board game you put out.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, now I gotta ask you. I mean, I'm all for. I get a lot of encouragement by people, not just sitting around thinking about doing something, but putting actions to their dreams. And actually, so I gotta ask you, what does it feel like, especially now that the game is getting Kickstarter backers are getting their games, and you're seeing a lot of the feedback on YouTube videos and Twitters and Facebooks and stuff. But how does it feel as a designer and creator of a game that to see a dream of yours actually, number one, actually become a physical reality, and just what goes through your mind when you see all these people play in your creation?
It's still kind of a bit unreal at the moment. I mean, I guess the games have only been arriving with people for a few years, but I mean, to give some context, I'm in my early 30s, and I've loved games, not necessarily board games, but just gaming in general for my entire life. And as a child, I always liked the idea of creating video games, and as I grew up, that kind of obsession grew more and more. And then I kind of fell in love with board games, and I liked the idea of kind of doing that. But it's like this concept of designing and creating a game has probably been something that's been in my life for 20 years or so. And a couple of days ago, I woke up and I kind of looked on Twitter, and I saw the first tweet of someone kind of saying they had received their game. And it just was that kind of like, you know, I've done it now. Someone has it. And even though the game's been physically made for a while, now people have it in their homes and on their tables. It's the most kind of unreal feeling, because it's completely real now. It's a product that people can take from a shop and take home, and hopefully it will bring joy into their household. And it's an amazing feeling. Like, I'm still, I think, processing the shock that this has kind of happened after all this time.
That's really cool. Yeah, I was hoping because I knew I got the tracking number about a week or so ago, so I knew it was going to be delivered today at the same day we're doing this interview. So I thought to myself, okay, I hope it comes before we start recording, because otherwise, I mean, I'm going to be. It's one of those things that every time a FedEx truck or a UPS truck pass by my apartment, it's like, oh, is that for me? Is that for me?
I mean, it's pretty impressive, isn't it? Because, I mean, you contacted me and we were first talking, I think, just before Christmas. And then we kind of organized to kind of arrange this date. And it was just a kind of out of the air date, really. And it's just funny how, you know, a few months ago, we never imagined the games would necessarily have been delivered by now. And for it to turn up on the same day as recording is too much of a coincidence, I think.
Yeah, time is everything. Yeah, that was just too uncanny. But well, tell us about the City of Kings, and just the backstory of how that game developed over time, and how it was play tested, and what was
of course.
Was the final version your initial, I guess, idea for the game, or did it grow over time?
So I guess I should start answering this by saying the City of Kings is a very big game, and there's a lot in the box. So I would say the core underlying concept of the game and the experience it provides is what I always wanted it to do. But some of the mechanics and the rule sets and some of the ways it achieves some of those things have definitely evolved over time from the original kind of systems to what they are now. So I started working on the game probably about 3.5 years ago now, and it's something that I've always been kind of thinking about in my head for ages. And as I said earlier, I love video games, and I played a lot of kind of MMORPGs, these big fantasy online kind of adventures. And I never felt that in the board game world I was really getting that same feeling. And I spent time kind of trying to change those digital kind of experiences into physical experiences, which is where the kind of original concepts of this game came together. And I really wanted to create that idea of this big open world fantasy adventure. So just like in kind of a MMORPG video game, this board game kind of offers you that experience of there's this big giant world and you don't know what's there. It's all these tiles that are turned over, and you and your allies will kind of explore out into this world, and you will start as kind of low level characters. And in that period of kind of a few hours, you go through this story, you kind of gather resources, you kill creatures, you complete quests, you go on this journey of exploration and discovery as you kind of level up and become more powerful to kind of achieve the objectives that you're set. And like that kind of overall concept is always what I was trying to achieve. But as I say, some of the kind of mechanics of individual elements have definitely evolved over the years.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about those mechanics. Could you describe to us, for those of us who haven't seen your playthrough or how-to videos yet on YouTube, which is great, by the way. What are the victory conditions and the mechanics on how basically how the game plays out?
Okay, so when you start playing the game, you choose either a story or a scenario. And a story is effectively just a longer version of the game that has multiple objectives, whilst the scenario has a single objective. And those objectives can range from escorting someone or killing some creatures or discovering a location. But when you start playing, you choose the story or the scenario you want. And then you effectively have this time tracker. And this time tracker represents the day as you play through the game. Everyone does a turn, and then the time moves on. And periodically, when the time has moved on enough, the city will assess the situation. And if you've not achieved the objectives, they start to lose hope. And over time, that hope tracker starts to go down and down. And if you run out of hope, you lose the game. So you're effectively trying to complete these objectives before the city loses hope that you can achieve it. And then with those two mechanics kind of bouncing off each other, you also have morale, and morale represents the kind of the lives of your party. So if a character dies, rather than being kind of removed from the game, they kind of come back to life. They kind of start over, but with all of their stuff, and you lose a morale. And if you lose too much morale, then again, you lose the game. So you're kind of making sure that you're playing safely, but taking risks so you don't die too many times, whilst you're trying to push against this clock and trying to work out what you need to do to achieve these goals.
So now, even though the game, the Kickstarter backers are getting it now, is this game going to be available in retail eventually?
Yeah, so we've got a number of copies going into distribution in the UK and Europe. We've got some large online retailers in the US who are kind of doing distribution via online methods. So we will also be selling some games directly, and we're going to be going to the UK Games Expo and Gen Con this year, and we're hoping to have some games with us as well at those events. But I should say that since the Kickstarter finished, the project has kind of continued to grow, and the number of pre-orders we had after the Kickstarter was much, much more than we kind of anticipated. So our stock levels have already kind of sold much more than we were anticipating. Oh, wow. So at this point, we're kind of already trying to decide whether we want to be doing kind of reprints or whether we're going to look into kind of distribution partners or a second Kickstarter, or what our plans might be to kind of get more of the games out there.
Okay, well, that'll be good. Yeah, I think one of the cool things, at least with the Kickstarter from the premium edition up, one of the things that really sold me with that was the anti-lock character sheet trays. I know when I'm playing like Terraforming Mars or something like that, anymore I can't play the game without the the broken token player tray. Because we have a cat, and he doesn't like to listen when we tell him to jump up on the table. So stuff like that is just a really good touch. Things like that just show to me that you're very in tune with the gamers and the games, and just not blinging the game out just for bling's sake, but adding components that actually have a function and actually an advantage to have versus just the plain, board.
No, totally. It was something that I spent a lot of time thinking about when we were kind of getting ready to launch that Kickstarter, because we wanted to keep the price of the game as low as possible. And as we've already said, this is a really big game and there's a lot in that box. And because of that, by nature, it's obviously going to be an expensive game. So I kind of came up with this concept of, let's have the base game, which is just the full experience, everything you need to play the game, all the stories, all the characters and so on. But then for those other tiers, as you mentioned, the premium and the deluxe, just to add things that gamers would want. So the premium was all about, the anti-knock sheets and just making that experience that little bit safer. So you've got these big giant character sheets in front of you, and those anti-knock sheets just help you to make sure that you don't accidentally push cubes around and kind of lose stuff. Right. But then the deluxe version was all about the quick setup trays and, how do we allow people to set this game up quicker and pack it away? There's about 30 different tokens in the City of Kings. And those quick setup trays have 30 compartments. So it just means that when you play, you can open them up, put them on the table and just get going. And once you finish, you put the lid on and put them away, and you don't have to worry about bags and things like that. And none of them are needed to play the game. But, as a gamer myself, it's just those are the kind of things that just help improve the experience and just make it easier to enjoy the game and not the fuss and the hassle of kind of what comes around playing that game.
That's right, because the last thing you want to do is say, oh, I want to play this game, and then by the time you set the whole thing up, it's like, you know what, I'm too damn tired to play. I'll put it away. So.
The amount of times I've, had people coming around to play games in the evening, and I've said to myself, should I just get it out and set it up on the table before I go to work so that when I come back, it's just there and ready, and we don't have the stress of having to sort it.
Exactly. Well, Frank, thank you so much, and congratulations again on a successful Kickstarter and what looks to be a really fantastic game, and a very meaty game. I mean, I could see myself playing this thing over and over again for months or even years to come. There's that much stuff in that box.
That's certainly the hope, and thank you for having me on here, and I really hope that you get a chance to enjoy the game and you get to play all the different kind of options within it.
Oh, I fully intend to. So. Well, actually, before we let you go, we have a little game we like to play with our guests.
Okay.
Called the Mega Meeple Rapid Fire Round. And it basically has nothing to do with gaming per se, but it just gives our listeners a window into our guests and what kind of personality they have and stuff like that.
So this is the terrifying bit, I guess. This is where I have to start sweating and panicking and hope that I don't say the wrong thing.
You're in a hot seat now. So, all right. So you ready?
I am.
All right. Beach or mountains?
Mountains.
All right. Game of Thrones or The Walking Dead?
Ooh, Walking Dead.
Okay. Coffee or tea?
Coffee. Okay. That's easy.
All right. In that case, regular or decaf?
Oh, regular.
Okay.
You can see how I made this game now, can't you?
Hey, you gotta keep your fuel up. And finally, books or movies?
Movies.
Okay. All right, Frank, thank you so much again for being a guest on the show. Now, if people want to find out more about you or the City of Games or the City of Kings, where could they go?
So the easiest place for people to go is the cityofkings.com, as that has links to all of our other kind of platforms. But you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube as City of Games HQ. And you can find me on Board Game Geek in the various game forums for the City of Kings and Vodoran Gardens.
Okay, cool. And of course, we'll have the links to all those things in the show notes of this episode. Well, Frank, thank you so much again, and looking forward to opening up my Christmas present or something. That's how I view it every time there's a box at the door. It's like, oh.
It definitely helps justify it, and I really do hope that you enjoy it and that you have a good time, and I look forward to kind of hearing your thoughts on it.
Oh, I certainly will. So, again, thank you again, and we'll see you later.
See you soon.
Well, thank you so much for listening. Stay tuned next week as we talk about the Shelf of Shame. And our guest next episode will be you guys in Sweden who will be talking about their Kickstarter game that will just be finishing up then called List It. So we hope you will join us again next week. If you liked the episode, go ahead and tell all your friends and gamer pals about it. Really appreciate getting the word out. If you have not already, you can go to iTunes and subscribe to the podcast. And while you're there, if you could give us some 5-star loving and leave us a little happy review, really appreciate that. But if you're not into Apple or iTunes or any of those things, our podcast is streamed on our website. It's www.themegameeple.com. And if you're a game designer or you have a Kickstarter or a Kickstarter coming up soon and you'd like to be a guest on the show to talk about your game, you can contact us through the Contact Us page, also found on the website. And if you would like to support the Mega Meeple, you can go to our Pod Pledge page and donate so much an episode or per month. It will really help us out on the hosting cost and stuff like that. Appreciate it very much. And the link to that is also found on the social media page on the website. So thank you so much for listening. And until next week, this is Tom saying, we'll see you at the gaming table.